take the established gritty and dark nature of the DCEU and bring in the lighthearted, almost comedic nature of the MCU. Co-written and co-directed by the two guys who gave us Man of Steel, Batman v Superman, The Avengers, and Age of Ultron. Wow, that should be pretty good, right? Right? On this episode of Moving Panels, we discuss Justice League. Welcome to Moving Panels, the podcast where we discuss movies and TV shows based on, inspired by, and adapted from the world of comic books. I'm your host, Laramy Wells, and I'm uniting the team. First, from the extreme northwest, it's Chad Smith.
How you doing, Laramy? Thanks for having me on for Dawn of Media. Justice, right? Dawn of Justice.
Wow.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, this is going to be a fun one, which is why I wanted to bring several of you guys on. And so second, he is the creator and the host of the 80s Flick Flashback. Please welcome Tim Williams.
I am dressed as a bat. Thank you very much. I can dig it.
Dig it, yeah.
Thanks for having me, Larry. It's going to be a fun one.
And finally, he's the dapper Southern gent. It's Blake Fowler.
Laramy, I'm excited to be a part of a more powerful gathering than even the Justice League right now. So thanks for having me on this.
Hey, again, it is a thrill to have you all on. I figured that for something as big as Justice League, especially we are right as we are recording this, and as it'll drop, we are right at the, using the phrase, the dawn of the Snyder Cut. That will release after this is recorded, after this is aired, and we will get back to talk about the Snyder Cut, but today we are just talking about the 2017 Justice League. So, what were your, did y'all all see this in theaters, or was this, I had to wait later?
Yes.
Unfortunately, yes. I saw it twice in the theater. Second time.
I saw it in theaters and then didn't watch it again until we decided to do this podcast. So yeah.
Same.
I was taking full advantage of my now defunct movie pass and saw it, like right after opening night.
Yeah, no, I saw it in theaters, and I've watched it a couple of times since. I'm not going to say but it's not one that dear Lord, I hate to go ahead and do the comparison, but I turned on and just watched the final battle scene of Avengers Endgame the other day, just for that battle scene. I didn't watch the entire movie. I just fast forwarded straight to that battle scene and watched it. Justice League, and we'll get into this, there's nothing in it that makes me want to do that.
No.
I turned it on and I thought, is this going to be as bad as I remember? That was my first thought. And I feel like that's a bad way to start any movie.
Well, we'll get into that some more, but let's go ahead and hop into it. As mentioned, this was released in 2017 on November 17th. 2017 was a big year because you had Logan, great movie, came out in March of 2017. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 was in May. Spider-Man Homecoming in July. Thor Ragnarok just came out 2 weeks before Justice League. And then Wonder Woman had actually come out in June. So Wonder Woman had just been introduced, big hit. With that, at least, Justice League was riding in on a successful wave.
Right.
But here was my thing. I remember when this came out, people were talking about that they rushed it, that they didn't have enough of a build that the MCU had done to Justice League, to Avengers. DC didn't do that same. But the thing is, this was the 5th movie of the DCEU, and Avengers was the 6th movie of the MCU.
Right, but it wasn't, there were 5 standalones, so you had a standalone for each character that went into the MCU before Avengers.
Well, no, you had 4, because you had Iron Man.
Hulk.
Iron Man. You had Iron Man and Iron Man 2 before Avengers.
Yeah. And you don't have a Hulk. Well, technically you do have a standalone Hulk movie, but it's a very different lineup. BVS is more akin to, it kind of has more comparison to like Civil War. So I do feel like even with that, timeline that it was a rushed movie. Batman is only introduced as kind of the villain in Batman versus Superman, and that's a whole other story. But I do think it was.
And to be fair, one of the 4 movies before this was also Suicide Squad. I am counting Suicide Squad. So
right, which is only tangentially, relevant.
It's got
to
Batman
this,
in it.
Yeah, he does. He doesn't make an appearance there.
Yeah. I'll give you that. But I don't think of Batman when I think of Suicide Squad. Like, once again, it was kind of a pseudo sequel. It was very loosely connected, but the connection was not primary to the story they were telling leading up to Justice League.
I think that's where it faltered more too, is that there wasn't Batman v Superman had it a little bit more, but there really isn't a lead up, because even in Batman v Superman, you get the footage of Barry Allen, and you get the footage of Cyborg and Aquaman. It wasn't like in the MCU where, like in Thor, we actually got to see Hawkeye in action, or in Iron Man 2, we got to see Black Widow in action. So we really were introduced to everybody and kind of got all of them established prior to Avengers.
I mean, do you think DC and Warner Brothers, though, are just banking on the background knowledge people have of their characters? I mean, there had been Superman movies, there had been Batman movies, unlike Marvel. Yeah. So do you think they're just like, okay, well, these people, we're already established these characters, so we're just going to throw everybody in at once and it's going to work because everybody knows who they are already?
You could make that. I'd make that same argument for Man of Steel and Batman v Superman as well.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, that's exactly what it was.
But ends up, it just looks messy and rushed.
Well, there was no real plot device to bring you. I feel like it feels rushed even in the writing, because they kill Superman at the end of Batman vs. Superman, basically to give you the impetus for this team to come together. And then, we also need a villain for them to fight. So then we introduce Steppenwolf, and the whole thing it's working backwards. It's almost like what you're talking about, like, worked against them. In that they assumed you knew, so now we're kind of writing backwards from that, and that's a lot of what makes it feel rushed, in my opinion.
Yeah, so we'll get into the writing and the directing, the production. I want to save that kind of for the end, so that we can just focus on the movie as it stood, and then we'll get into a lot of the stuff. Like I said, we are on the precipice of getting a Snyder Cut, but let's just look at Justice League the way it is, and of course we got to start with our characters. The main one being, in my opinion, for this movie was Batman, because he's the one that's bringing the team together. Once again, played by Ben Affleck. I gotta admit, I think, especially when I watched it back, Blake was talking about watching it back and, what were my expectations. Since it hasn't been that long ago since I did watch Batman v Superman, I think Ben Affleck gives a better performance in this one as Batman.
Agreed.
Yeah, I've never been there are people that did not like Ben Affleck as Batman, Bruce Wayne. It didn't bother me as much as it bothered other people. I mean, I didn't think he was the best one, but he surely wasn't the worst. And once again, he's bringing a different take of that character anyway, so I wasn't expecting him to duplicate what somebody else had done. So
yeah, I think unfortunately it was kind of underwritten, because clearly in the books there's a lot of like the dark, grizzled old man Batman, and it plays super well. It's some of the best written Batman runs, and so you have the opportunity to do that. Not calling Ben Affleck old, but he's clearly the older, grizzled Batman, and they just kind of. They're still answering a lot of the same questions. We don't need to have the exposition with Alfred about why he does what he does for the 900th time. Like, it's just kind of...
But you know what we don't get for the 900th time, and that's the death of his parents.
Yeah.
In fact, his parents are not even mentioned in this movie. He's actually the only member of the Justice League who there is no reference or no moment with the parents.
Yeah. See, they knew we had enough background information already on that one. We didn't need to hear that anymore.
I think Martha was mentioned enough in BVS. So I'll just.
Oh man!
Yeah. Why did you say that name, Tim? Why did you say that name?
Right, I wanted to go back though on Chad mentioned about Batman being the older, grizzled, veteran, which they do say in this movie. He's been Batman for 20 years. They actually say that in this movie. But correct me if I'm wrong. Doesn't he look younger than he did in Batman v Superman?
Lazarus Pit, obviously.
In which part of the movie? That's one of the problems, is you see an in shape and out of shape Ben Affleck as that goes through the cuts, and it's one of its problems.
Yeah, but like the gray was kind of to me missing. He didn't have as much of the worn look on his face.
Look, I mean, heavy makeup work
if you were
going
going
on
to confront Jason Momoa, you would you would color your hair and try to look your best as well. Let's be honest.
Color your hair.
Come on. He did grow a beard impressively fast, by the way. Like basically on a plane flight to Norway or wherever that is. He gets a pretty good stubble going on.
He rode a horse the entire way there. He didn't. There was no plane.
Like, why not take a jet there?
Right. Speaking of which, why didn't he just take like the Bat jet?
Yeah.
Like, why is he flying commercial? Or well, not commercial. He's still Bruce Wayne, but I was confused by this whole thing.
Wouldn't it hold more weight if Batman showed up to recruit Aquaman instead of Bruce Wayne showing up?
On like the Bat Dog team, he should have just like rolled in. I'm sorry, I'm really taking this off the rails. Serious question though, like I do not understand why Batman is the leader of the Justice League. Apparently, like in this logic, just the fact that you're the guy who had the thought that we should assemble a team means that you're automatically the leader.
Yeah, but is he though?
Even from just a
because he kind of builds up Wonder Woman.
Yeah, he puts that impetus on her towards.
He's just the one that brings them together
in the fight. But he's the he's the one that is deciding what course the team takes. He's really the guy who argues hard that they need to bring back Superman, and you get all of this kind of his what am I looking for? Like his lack of self-confidence and his little conversation with Alfred about why he's not as human as this alien is, and all this kind of stuff. So I feel like he's the mastermind. Like he makes most of the decisions of what the team does
because he's rich.
Power.
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought I would throw that out there.
It's definitely. I agree with you.
Yeah, and I would say because they needed a Tony Stark, and he was the closest one they could get. So
yeah, it's very forced to me in the sense that coming off of BVS, he just apparently flips the switch when. Look, I'm not going to go into the Martha thing again, but when he decides to help Superman save his mom, this is like a turning moment, and he's now went from being a 20-year career solo vigilante to I'm a team dude who, it's just a little bit of a stretch.
Well, again, not solo the entire time, because in BVS we do know that there was a Robin. We assume it was the Jason Todd Robin, which you would then want to argue there had to have been a Dick Grayson before that, maybe. So we know he had Robin. But I agree with you on the complete 180, because he uses almost the same argument that he did in Batman v Superman. He talks about he needs to take out Superman because if there's even a 1% chance that he will turn evil, we need to take him out. And then in this movie, he tells Diana about the percentage of surviving without Superman. And so,
yeah. Well, and is completely on board with Diana, despite her being arguably 99% as powerful as Superman in this iteration, and never has a problem with her apparently. Yeah. So
is she though? Because, and I know we can get into this more. I mean, Superman takes out the entire team. So
yeah,
but okay. Well, let's get into Wonder Woman since we're on her. So Wonder Woman. This was her third time, Gal Gadot, playing Wonder Woman. Just played her very successfully in a solo movie. We were talking about, and we'll get into more with all the reshoots. I didn't know this, and apparently neither did the filmmakers originally, but she was pregnant for some of this, which is very impressive.
Extremely impressive.
I'll give her credit for that. I do think, as we were talking about with leadership, if you want to say whether she's one of the leaders or not, she's definitely the moral compass. She's definitely the one that is able to pull them together and able to get them to work together.
I mean, it's a bunch of grown men in costumes running around, so she's got to pull the children together at some point in time to work together.
And she continues, just like with Wonder Woman. Like, I enjoyed, not to say Gal Gadot is not amazing to look at, but in terms of her character of Wonder Woman, I enjoyed every moment watching her do whatever it was that she was doing on the screen.
Mm-hmm. She is Wonder Woman, like at this point in time. As much as Christopher Reeve was Superman.
Yeah. No, yeah,
I think she is Wonder Woman.
I will say, though, that during just about every single battle, I really got tired of seeing her slap her bracelets together.
It apparently was a favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know. Nothing. It's hard to fault Gal Gadot or Gadot. I can't ever get a clarification on how it's pronounced.
Let me speak on that real quick. I actually think it's Gadot, and here's why. So Wonder Woman 1984. There is I think it's the homeless guy that Barbara always walks by and talks to. He is reading Waiting for Godot. And I think that's supposed to be a nod to how you're supposed to pronounce her last name.
I've always said it Godot, but I keep hearing it Godot lately. But anyways, her performance aside, it's a very poorly written arc, if you can even call it that.
It's not an arc. No.
Outside of her long exposition of what's going on with Steppenwolf, filling in Bruce Wayne, there's not a lot that she adds to this that you could have, if you extract her from the movie, there's not much missing. Just that portion of Bruce Wayne figuring out who the villain is, basically. And so I think they did her a disservice, especially coming into, she has arguably the most successful DC film so far. It just kind of was, it was very underwhelming to me. She's very underused. They don't do much except for she's supposed to tell Bruce what's happening and then kind of buoy his confidence a little bit. And outside of that, you don't get much. And it's even problematic in the sense of just basic plot. She is, the scene at the beginning where it introduces her, while amazing, a really cool scene. Who is this dude trying to blow up? I can't remember what it is, museum or something. Who's this guy? Why is he being given kind of a platform? And then there's zero real resolution to that. Who was that dude? What was he doing? It's not connected to anything else. Fast forward just, a few minutes later, and Bruce Wayne is criticizing her for not participating in the world. And then you get to the end of the movie, and it kind of goes full circle. She's doing the same thing, stopping this robbery. And that's apparently her, waking up and being part of the world, doing the same thing she was doing before Bruce Wayne had this chit-chat with her. Well, I think it's a really problematic arc.
I think the difference there is the first time she didn't take credit. She stopped the robbery, but you don't see her talking in the news. People are meeting with people. It's still weak. I'm not disagreeing with your point. I'm just saying they're not the beginning and end scene of her are not exactly the same, because at the end she's talking to the kids and kind of saying, "Yeah, I'm the one," kind of putting herself out there and being known as Wonder Woman, which it seems like, not to jump movies, but it also seemed to be the issue with Wonder Woman 1984 is she was in hiding, and then, at the end of that movie, she wants to be more known. So, but I think I agree with you in the sense that she has a weak plot point, but I think she was one of the more compelling characters. And maybe that's because, like Laramy said, coming right off of her solo movie where we got to see her origin, they kind of felt like, well, let's not give her too much in this one because we just gave her own, solo movie. But at the same time, because we knew her backstory, it made us root for her more and have more of a bond with her than everybody else, even though she had very little to do.
So what about her conversation with Cyborg? Do you think if you take her out and have it be Batman that has that conversation? Or because to me, I think that had to be her.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's still even watching it back again, I wanted there to be more.
That's this entire movie.
Really see the connection. I feel like, once again, I guess we'll see. But there is it's very rushed in that conversation, and all of a sudden they have trust. Even you see it later in the movie where they kind of have this glancing moment. I'm like, I know you guys have this, but I can't really say I know the moment where that became solidified, where you were in the fire together or you had this really heartwarming conversation and, oh, you've changed my mind. It just never happened. You're just kind of led to believe, oh, they gave this look, so, oh, they're all good now. Back to the fighting. So
again, there's a lot of that.
I guess Yeah, but I would I want you to expand a little bit on what do you mean by that she's the only one that could have given that, because I feel like that's just a writer's problem. You could have written virtually any of them to
I think because the arc that and again, as you say, it's a weak arc. I'm not going to deny that. I think it's the fact that she is one who has been hiding, and she has to realize in herself she's got to step up and be a bigger hero. And so by her being the one talking to Cyborg, it's almost like she's helping herself by trying to help him accept who he is and join the fight.
I would argue that Batman could do the same thing, because he's also having to play outside of his sandbox and grow, and he's had to very quickly, as I pointed out earlier, change his mind on Superman, metas in general, all this kind of stuff. So he's flipped a switch, and I feel like you could have written that either way. Like, I don't feel that she's even needed in that capacity. I was very disappointed. And granted, like, I have to give the filmmakers some credit in the sense that it's not like this whole movie was made after Wonder Woman came out. Like, this was just, months beforehand that Wonder Woman was this successful. So I'm giving a little bit of hindsight is 20/20 criticism in that sense. But I mean, I don't know. It's not like they didn't know what was going on at Patty Jenkins' movie when she was making that either. So
from what I found was initial shooting for Justice League began only like a week or so after she wrapped for Wonder Woman.
Right.
And I would say, even to your point, Chad, and this is once again a very big stretch, but knowing that Cyborg lost his mom in the explosion that created him, were they trying to pair him with Diana to be more, or Wonder Woman as maybe a mother figure to kind of fill that void where that's the connection? But once again, not well established. And I mean, once again, that's a stretch, just piece of dialogue together. But once again, could have been really cool to really see that fleshed out more or expanded upon more to really build that connection. But once again, it just wasn't there. So it was lacking for me.
And I think that's a problem with, as we've all said, with the entire movie. I know we're going to get to writing in a minute, but with how every character is written, it's just there's no connection between any of the characters. Almost, it feels like to me watching this. I'm like, how do any of you come together? Even in the first, even Bruce and Diana, there's zero partnership chemistry. Even like they're constantly butting heads with each other. And I know eventually we all come together and everybody's all's well that ends well. But it's so poorly written that it's tough to believe anybody's connection to any other character at certain points.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right, so we've already kind of started talking about him. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about Cyborg, Victor Stone, played by Ray Fisher. Not an original in the sense of Justice League's been around since the 60s. The Cyborg was not introduced as a Justice League member until the New 52. He was obviously a Teen Titan and was introduced in the 80s when the new Teen Titans were established. Going off of what we're kind of was talking about with Gal Gadot's performance, I think Ray Fisher gives probably right up there with one of the better performances. He almost had to, considering all you really see is his face.
Yeah, he's cloaked in CGI.
Yeah.
No, man, it's easy to kind of critique years after the movie was made, but I don't think you can talk about this and not mention Ray Fisher's very, very vocal fight with Warner Brothers at this point. He has refused to make any movies with them because of how he felt he was treated making this movie in particular. And I think it's super clear, and even just the stuff that Tim was talking about a minute ago, a lot of his stuff was clearly left on the cutting room floor.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many little lines that when you really look at it, you're like, that obviously was referencing something else that we just didn't get to see. And I don't know. I do kind of feel bad for Ray Fisher. I don't know any of the real story there, and he hasn't been very forthcoming with what happened. He just has been very vocal that he has issues with it. So who knows? But I think this is the most tortured example of why this movie didn't come together well. You have the two directors. You have, obviously there's some tension on set, and not in a good way. This isn't, gosh, I'm trying to think of one of the famous examples of a director. It's not a Blade Runner situation Stanley where Kubrick it paid off
Shelley
by
Long and The Shining.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a famous one. So, I mean, it doesn't seem like it was beneficial at all. It seems like a lot of Ray's stuff was just left on the floor. You don't get much of Cyborg. The CGI is honestly pretty terrible.
It's very cartoonish. I couldn't help but notice that. Like, there were times when they would show him full body without, the hoodie and whatnot covering him. And it was just looked like a cartoon with a human face.
I would say to that point, a lot of the movie CGI, the green screen work, it's pretty bad. Like some of the worst for a big budget film that I can remember seeing. I just remember watching it and being like, I'm taken so far out of the movie because it looks so bad.
Yeah. And they could have practical affected a lot of that. I mean, Doom Patrol's Cyborg visually is more impressive to me than this one. I don't want to compare the actors. I think they both did a good job, but I mean, you didn't even have to spend the money on that. Do a practical effect and just leave it in the real world.
Yeah, and there's so much they've done in like Terminator movies with showing part robot, part human. Even back in the original in the 80s, that scene where I remember he's like changing or popping out his eyeball or whatever it was that he does in front of the mirror. I mean, that was great actual physical effect. Yeah, you can. So in the comics, the reason Cyborg joins is they tie him in the same way this movie does. Is they make it so that his cybernetics are fourth world. They are part of Apocalypse, if you want to say, and so that's what brings him into the Justice League. And you can tell this movie, obviously they did that, but you can tell that should have been a bigger momentum swing for the movie, and it just wasn't.
And I mean, maybe you're seeing something I didn't, but I don't feel like that was resolved either. I mean, you have the conflict of, is his tech completely compromised by Steppenwolf? And yes, at the end, he clearly fights against, the villain, but we don't get like a real resolution in that. I feel that's another one of those things that just got cut somewhere and you wonder why. 1 minute you have Aquaman really questioning his loyalty because of this, and the next minute they're all just buddy and fighting.
And you see him at the end, and obviously he changes his look to actually have the circle on his chest and look more like the Cyborg we know. But that's the same thing throughout the entire movie. His body is doing things that he can't control. When did he ever get control? That was we don't know. Right. And
since we are comparing comic books with movies on this podcast, where in the comics do you see this like uber dry robot man? Like, he's more robot than he is human. There's almost no comedy to him. Whereas
booyah.
Especially
he said booyah.
What more do you want?
But Teen Titans Cyborg he's a funny dude, and
a lot of personality.
I don't know. I just felt that there was a lot missing to this.
No, and it's like it's like they teased us with it too when he and Flash had their little moment. Because you're thinking there's the buddy right there. This is the fun part, and Cyborg just almost kind of brushes it off, and you're going, okay, well, that's not going to work. But let's go ahead and get into Flash, played by Ezra Miller. He is the Barry Allen version of the Flash, although to me, he acted a lot more like the Wally West version of the Flash.
Giant child, absolutely.
Yeah, even the whole thing about the metabolism and all, that's usually more of a Wally West
eating all the time.
Thing. Yeah. So he clearly was the comic relief. Not to say that Aquaman didn't add in some, but Ezra Miller, little independent movie darling that he was coming into this, clearly was the comic relief. This movie to me felt like, again, them trying to stack. And what I mean by that, we talked about earlier, the MCU versus the DCEU. The MCU had their clear cut, here's this character, let's introduce this character in a full-length movie. Here's this character, let's introduce this character in a full-length movie. Whereas DC has done, all right, here's Superman, and now we'll do another Superman movie, but introduce Batman. And Wonder Woman. Yeah. But then they did the Wonder Woman movie. And now in this one, it was almost like, it really felt to me, we just talked about the downfalls of Cyborg. It really felt to me like they were doing this to hopefully lead to a Flash movie, because there was a lot of Flashes background story and a lot of how Flash is becoming the Flash, even though he's not called the Flash at any point. Right. Which part of me also has a problem with is, where does he get the idea of the suit if he's not calling himself the Flash? I don't know. That's
So this kid's living in a train station, and he's got this suit floating around. Again, probably beckons back to so much was cut from this that we don't know how stuff ends up happening.
Because that's another thing. So clearly Barry is just a kid. I don't remember if they say his age, early 20s or whatever he's supposed to be. And seems to be, in my opinion, it seems like he's homeless and he just found some sort of bunker somewhere. But yet he's got his own bat cave in this place. And yet there seems to be no indication anywhere in this movie that he is smart, which Barry Allen is obviously supposed to be.
Yeah. Right. No, that's true.
Yeah, I think there's a piece of dialogue where they say when Alfred and Bruce Wayne are looking at his footage that he is a drifter, or like he doesn't stay in one spot very long, or that he was homeless. I don't know if they use that exact term, but whatever term they use. So when they showed him at the train station, I was like, oh, that's his new place where he's hiding out. He's under the radar. But when he opened up, he has 20 flat screen TVs. I'm like, what kind of money are you making? Are you finding these on the side of the road and refurbishing them or whatever? So he had a lot of cool stuff in there. I don't want to compare, but I'm going to anyway. You take the introduction of Peter Parker in Civil War. It's clear that he's very smart and very resourceful, even though his suit was very low tech. And so then Tony Stark gives him the suit that matches his intellect that he can play around with in his own movie. You don't get that with the Flash, where the suit that you see hanging in that little train station bat cave, as Blake said, or Flash cave. But it doesn't. When he joins the team, he's still wearing the same suit, and it seems to be just as high tech as everybody else's. So yeah.
Before we move away from that one, to give Zack Snyder a little bit of credit, because I feel like we're kind of deriding the movie a lot, but that scene is fantastic.
Oh, I agree.
Like
I agree.
The slow-mo battery.
Barry Allen goes into, dude, it's so good and very comic booky. Like it was, I like that scene a lot. And so you do see that, Zack Snyder is a huge, mega comic book fan, and that does show through. But I don't know. I guess I have a little bit more in that I saw some of the smartness, his intellect, but they tried to just write it in the wrong spots. Like it was always just he made some uber intelligent comment that everybody went kind of raised an eyebrow at a little bit, like what's this kid talking about? But the suit in particular, you're absolutely right with that, and they so missed a point with that. The Tony Stark comparison is very, very apt, because you also have the other billionaire tech guy in comic books that could have provided said suit, so it's the dude who recruits him could have went, yep, and you're joining the team comes with this suit, it's not hard to write.
We never saw Aquaman get his suit. I mean, one scene he's out there with jeans and no shirt, saving a guy in the water, and then all of a sudden he's on the team and he's got this, Yeah,
but we can at least assume his suit is like Atlantean armor or something.
Yeah. True, but once again, you never saw it up until that point. So.
I honestly think, going off of what Chad is saying and what Blake is saying, or actually what all of y'all are saying in some way, shape, or form, is with the similarity between Tony Stark and Spider-Man. You have Batman, Bruce, and I think, again, we'll get into this later when we're really just breaking down the movie and not just talking characters. To me, have a scene where Bruce takes an old Robin costume, which could be primarily red, and uses it as the basis for the Flash outfit. Just a thought off the top of my head. But going again, because you're talking about, we are bashing a lot, the CGI. I admit I liked Flash's CGI. The way the lightning came off of him, especially when it would start before he moved. Yeah. I loved that. The way that it was almost like he powers up and then takes off.
Yeah. Yeah, Snyder's good at that. He does the same thing with Superman. You get the dust rising off the ground, momentarily before Superman takes flight and stuff like that. That was really good though.
Yeah. And not to jump too far ahead, because we'll talk about this, but when you were talking about, Chad, that scene, that was one of your favorite scenes. Once again, going back and watching this, I think now seeing it a third time, and probably Laramy's, because he's seen it more than any of us, has noticed it more. But you can clearly tell the Snyder scenes and the Whedon scenes, and they're not that close together. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's there's a lot of scenes, and it's clear that interaction with Bruce and Barry Allen was very much a Snyder scene, even though I think Whedon probably put a couple, jokes and stuff in there as well, kind of lighten it up. But it's very evident which scenes, which director had the most of his hand in.
So in moving to Aquaman, which I'm assuming is kind of where we're going here, the scene that proves what you just said, kind of the exception that proves the rule thing, is the scene that everybody thought was for sure a Joss Whedon scene, and all rumors point to it not being, is I think it's the funniest scene in the movie, actually, when you have the lasso of truth versus Aquaman. Everybody assumed that was a Joss Whedon scene, and it wasn't, but I thought that was the funniest moment.
And again, that gets into you talking about Snyder knowing his comics. That's actually a bit from the Justice League Origins, but of course it's Green Lantern that actually gets accidentally sits on the...
But it's funny, and he directed it well. I mean, that just because it's straight from the comics, and I'm not saying you were making this point, but just because it's straight from the comics doesn't mean that you could have turned it into a funny movie scene, and he does. And so, he takes a lot of criticism about not knowing how to use comedy, but the funniest scene in the movie is directed by Zack Snyder. So, rumored to be. That's one of those things that you never get a clear point on what scene was what. I guess we will with the coming cut, but who knows?
Yeah, and going back to your point, I'm not going to try to. We need to move on, but even going back to Barry Allen and saying, putting in those lines of him being really smart, but it gets overshadowed because they made him so goofy. As the comic relief, as Laramy said, it's like you miss those moments because every time he's on screen, I'm waiting for him to either do something goofy or say something goofy. So
just be awkward. It
almost diminished his character for me because he was kind of relegated to comic relief, which was disappointing for me because I'm a big fan of The Flash. So that was a big disappointment for me overall.
Yeah, I admit some of the Flash, Barry Allen's character does kind of get washed away because of the comic relief. For instance, because I did have this written down in my notes, the fact that he's Jewish, that just came out of left field.
Pretty weird.
Yeah. I mean,
sprinkle that in there.
It's never seen it in the comics in any iteration before. Yeah,
but I mean, that's cool.
That was just, I wonder if that was just an ad lib that Ezra Miller made, just kind of riffing on the scene that just got left in.
Well, it's canon now.
Exactly. Yeah.
But again, that points to the problem with this movie. There's no payoff. Mm-hmm. Virtually anything that they do. Outside of just canon stuff, virtually anything that they try to add to the universe, there's no payoff. There's never a moment where that comes into play. I don't know. I know that that's a throwaway line and doesn't really matter, but I think it magnifies just what's wrong with this film.
Yeah. All right, so going back to Aquaman that we were getting into, Jason Momoa's debut as Aquaman, auditioning to play Lobo. I think because anyone who knows the character of Lobo, that is really who he's playing. That
would have been amazing.
I don't know where this version. I mean, it's a different look. It's definitely the Jeff Johns inspired look of Aquaman, the one that was in the animated series with the longer hair and the tougher persona than the one that you obviously got in the 40s and 60s and all. That's the one that's always made fun of. Mm-hmm. Although I do love that they do make fun of him with the being able to talk to fish. And that's, brings back to Chad's point. And then he throws in, no, it's the water that does the talking. And I'm just going, what? Like, that's brilliant. The whole little waves that you
like
always...
some kind of water Jedi.
Yeah.
And,
you know...
But there's no payoff.
But yeah, there's no payoff to that.
Oh, man.
Let's say if the water does the talking, why are we creating air pocket bubbles to talk to each other under the water too?
Yeah.
What's the deal?
In the worst green screens of a
that's
terribly
what I'm saying, man.
movie. So a totally unnecessary scene at all. Why are we taking like a weird left turn into Atlantean politics for a few minutes here in a air bubble with a dude that's supposed to be powered by water?
Yeah.
Like the whole thing.
That's that stacking that I was talking about that they're doing.
Yeah.
They're giving you little bits of Aquaman because they're planning on making the Aquaman movie, which of course they did.
But
Chad clearly doesn't keep up with Atlantean politics as it was an election year in 2017. So that's why they were discussing that.
Yeah, or C-SPAN and
SEA span, C-SPAN. Nice.
Moving on to the final member of the Justice League, the return of Superman and Henry Cavill. I have to admit, and you've heard me say this, and I did the Batman v Superman episode with Blake, and I will say it just about every time. I am so glad he didn't really get to be Clark because...
Thank goodness.
He's a great Superman. And honestly, this is probably his best Superman, but it's also the problem with it because there's such a disconnect from BVS. Apparently just his fight of his action to save the world has just turned everybody's opinion of him, because we spent BVS wrestling with this dude who, is powerful enough to be a threat. Is it a good thing that we're worshiping him? All of these questions that are probably some of the good things of BVS, they completely just turn on. And it's all of a sudden Superman is this colorful like hero that everybody loves. And man, it's that opening scene to me says everything you need to know about how they're going to treat Superman. It's pointless. He is venerated, but even the kid who is interacting with him has no joy in it. He's, it's very strange. And it just ends with, A, it's morbid because it's reminding you that Superman is dead, like first thing in the movie. And then B, it just ends with him looking off pointlessly into space, like
goofy
wistfully,
grin on his face,
He's missing his mustache.
Yeah, a goofy
for.
grin from the fake mouth that is on him from the CGI to take out his mustache.
Oh, it's so bad. It's so bad.
Yeah, the opening scene didn't make much sense either, Chat. Like, I think I even made note of that. Like, what's the point of including that in the movie other than just to, again, remind you, oh, hey, this guy's dead in this universe. Yeah. And also, we love found footage films now. Like, I didn't understand why.
Yeah. It just, that scene is very... I don't know. It just tells you a lot to me of kind of where their headspace was, because it's just really poorly done. If you'd just thought a minute about the characters that you want to direct here, like what is this kid's reaction to getting a moment with Superman right after this heroic rescue? So you have a kid who's like witnessing a terrible thing. All of a sudden, the Man of Steel swoops into the picture, saves the day, then gives you a minute of his time to just kind of
for your podcast.
Chit-chat.
The kid does say it's for his podcast.
Yeah. And he does not seem, he seems happy. He doesn't seem excited. Like there's just no humanity to it to me. I don't know. I don't want to up on it too much, but it's not good.
Yeah, it did feel like an alternate reality Superman. This isn't really him. This is a clone. And I can't think back watching it the first time, but I always feel like I had that thought, like, okay, this isn't really him. They're showing us some clone to throw us off later, right? And then by the end of the movie, I forgot that scene was even there. And when I watched the second time, I was like, oh, yeah, this was at the beginning of this movie. Why was this here? Once again, as Chad said, there was no payoff. There's nothing that brings you back to that moment to like, oh, that's why they put that there. It's such a throwaway moment that is really forgettable and should be forgotten.
Yeah, Tim needs to write for DC at this point, because that would have been a better plot point, having a clone Superman and like him just running around saving people and then having to fight him later, Bizarro style, than what ended up happening.
Yeah.
Spoiler, we'll actually get to that a little bit later, but let's continue. So if you're keeping count at home, there are 6 members of the Justice League in this movie. However, very infamous was one of the first posters released said Unite the Seven, but we didn't get 7. We got 6. Who do you think the 7th was supposed to be? Do you think it was supposed to be Green Lantern because that would have been the Justice League in the comics, or because of the talk that Harry Lennox's character from Batman v Superman is supposed to be Martian Manhunter? Do you think the 7th was supposed to be him?
I would only say Green Lantern because during that scene of the initial fight over the boxes, you do see the Green Lantern ring, and I guess one of the Green Lanterns or the League of Green Lanterns.
You
can help me because so that's why I would think it would be Green Lantern. I felt like that was obviously there in that scene for a reason, and once again, no payoff because there's that scene where they're all fighting together, and then it's time for us to fight together at the end. Where's Green Lantern? Why isn't he here? You gave us the little sneak peek earlier, but now he's not here. So.
Well, this will not come as a surprise to Laramy since we had like 2-hour-long, phone calls about what was going to happen in this movie before it came out. I was super hoping it was going to be Martian Manhunter. I really like that character. And my thought process was Green Lantern at the time was so sullied by its solo movie. And who would you have had to come and play him at that point? Like, that would have been a very difficult
You also would have had to jump Hal Jordan. You would either have to go to John Stewart or Kyle Rayner or...
You go to John Stewart.
Lord forbid, Guy Gardner. But you would have to... You couldn't do Hal Jordan again.
Yeah. Yeah, it would have just been kind of problematic, whereas Martian Manhunter would have been kind of a plug-in that would have, I feel like nobody would have seen coming, and it would have been pretty cool. But, it didn't happen. So either, Zack Snyder can't count or,
Math is hard, Jack.
Ran out of budget, spending it all on CGI mustache removal. I don't know.
All right, let's finish out our character conversation by talking about the villain, the very flat villain.
Wait, he's a character?
Oh, yeah. Look, I wanted to talk about him just because he's really the only one that I could give some background to that wouldn't be tied into another movie.
Yeah.
So Steppenwolf, the character, because again, when else am I going to get to talk about Steppenwolf? Character got to debut in New Gods #7 back in February of 1972, created by Jack Kirby, which is why I wanted to bring him up, because he is the first Jack Kirby created character for DC to appear in a DC movie. Of course, almost the entire MCU was created by Jack Kirby.
I was like, he's got enough on his plate already.
But this is the first Jack Kirby created character for a DC movie, and I just love that as the comic book nerd in me. So I wanted to bring that up.
Did they use the name that Jack Kirby came up with? Because that's about it.
And like they spat on that image.
The visual isn't.
No,
Steppenwolf.
The visuals.
The character is. Yeah.
Well, and see that. I will say this though: the character in the comics, to me, if I just am given a panel, I have to take a minute to tell myself: am I looking at Steppenwolf, or am I looking at Ares, or who am I looking at?
Right. Sure. This is definitely Ares from Wonder Woman cosplaying as Steppenwolf, right? That's what ended up happening here.
But it's hard to admit that even Ares had more depth.
Mm-hmm.
It's so.
I agree.
And why does he look the way he looks? Because he's human. In the flashback, when you get kind of the origin of the battle from the Amazonian perspective, he just randomly loses a battle and changes into this thing. He looked pretty human, and then morphs into the Steppenwolf thing we see later. It's another one of those things that just like there's no rhyme or reason to me.
I will say, at least he doesn't look like what the hologram version of him looks like in the deleted scene from Batman v Superman, because he looked like just a monster in that.
Yeah.
He at least held some humanoid look with this look.
It's just like from a balaclava, just a tiny little portion of his face.
Yeah.
But no. As you can, I hope you can tell at this point, I do not like this character at all. I don't think it was well thought out, written, performed. It's just so flat. You see nothing about his real motivation. Why does he keep talking about Mother? And again, just something with zero resolve. It's just like, and they, we're watching superhero movies. We clearly can dive into magical entities, but they really play up this mother box thing really hard with almost no...
Other than the fact it's just a teleportation device.
Yeah.
That's all you ever really see happen.
So bizarre. Mm-hmm. Yes, but apparently there's a religion that goes along with it that we're not given any kind of insight into. It's very, very, very thin. As much trash as the MCU took for its villains pre-Thanos, maybe pre-Hela, there were a couple that kind of did well, but I feel like you can name almost any villain in the MCU and it's a more complete character than this is. Mm-hmm. And he's supposed to be your big bad for the big team movie. It's just really lackluster.
Hello, movie viewers and fellow movie lovers. My name is Tim Williams, and I'm the creator and host of Movie Views Presents the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast. See, I love the 80s, and I have a great appreciation and nostalgic passion for the classic 80s flicks that birthed my love for movies and ultimately helped shape my childhood. On each episode, I'll discuss, with a special guest co-host of course, a different film from the 1980s. We'll share memories, favorite characters, iconic scenes, and even share some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. We'll discuss famous blockbusters like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Coming to America, Ghostbusters, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun, Die Hard, and many, many more, as well as some other cult classics and even lesser-known flicks we discovered on cable TV or the now-defunct video rental stores. Remember those? No matter what 80s flick we choose to talk about, we'll always have a good time, so come and check us out. You can find the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast on major podcasting platforms like Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Anchor, and more. Be sure to subscribe or follow so you don't miss a single episode. Once again, I'm Tim Williams, and I hope you'll join me for the next 80s Flick Flashback.
All right, let's get into the moving panels. We've already hit a lot of this, so this conversation might go deeper or it might go quicker. We'll have to see. But let's go ahead and take care of what we've kind of alluded to since the beginning, the elephant in the room, if you will, and that is the whole Snyder versus Whedon conversation when it comes to Justice League. We cannot talk about this movie as much as we'd like to. It's ingrained in this movie the issues with the production, and so we have to talk about it. The movie was originally written by Chris Terrio, I guess is that how you pronounce it, and directed by Zack Snyder after a horrible family incident that we will not get into with Zack Snyder. He had to leave the set along with his wife, who was the producer. They both had to leave, and Warner Brothers brought in Joss Whedon. Joss Whedon, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, one of the most groundbreaking shows on television. He was even ahead of his time with shows like Firefly and Dollhouse. Mm-hmm. And then we get him to come in and do the Avengers. He follows it up with Age of Ultron. As much as we give the Russo brothers credit in the MCU, Joss Whedon was the one behind those first two Avengers movies. So you bring him in, and not only do you bring him in to direct, but they pretty much let him rewrite the script. Mm-hmm. And so Joss Whedon comes in. Now, Chad alluded to this earlier. We don't really know how much of the movie remained Zack Snyder's and how much of the movie was Joss's. So there really is a lot to that, but again, this is ingrained with this movie. It is ultimately, no matter what we talk about, I do think it is this production hiccup, if you will call it that. It is the main problem that this movie had. And because we talk about, and I said this in my cold open, this movie doesn't exist in the Snyderverse, and this movie does not exist in the Whedonverse. It's floating in between.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I don't think there's anybody that would argue that this is a cohesive film. And we were even undersold on the Joss Whedon part of it. I remember them kind of acting like they just brought in Joss at the end to kind of clean it up and kind of get it to the theater. And then you saw it and you were like, oh no, my friend, no. Like there. And then after you saw it, all the reports were starting to come out about how much they had spent in reshoots and why Henry Cavill's face looked weird and, all this kind of stuff. And so, you just got to wonder. Well, I guess we don't have to wonder for much longer. What it would have looked like if one man had made this movie. But and Zack Snyder, to his credit, has been kind of downplayed on any criticism from his point of view on what did become. So you have to kind of give him a little bit of credit there. And it's cool that he's getting a chance to rectify that. But I can't think of anybody that argued that this was one cohesive movie.
So, in all transparency, I wouldn't call myself a DC fanboy, but I certainly prefer DC over Marvel when it comes to both comics and movies, TV shows, etc. And the reports that I've read are this is 90 minutes of Joss Whedon reshoots and about 30 minutes of Zack Snyder. And you can tell that the look of it is a Marvel movie. It looks like a Marvel film. And then there's the color scheme, the way that they're standing, the way they're posed, the physical humor, the comedy in the lines. Like every scene, it has got some joke in it. Like I didn't care for it, didn't like it. I'm not going to jump the shark on skipping to my little bit at the end on whether I'm going to stack it, trade it, but it became a Marvel movie. It wasn't a DC film anymore. It became a Marvel Frankenstein's monster of a film.
I'll agree with you on that last statement. It's a Frankenstein film. I don't agree with that it looks like a Marvel movie, because it doesn't look like a Marvel movie. Yes, it's brighter. Superman suit. We truly see the blue stick out of Superman's suit. And of course, we talked about already Cyborg looking like a cartoon, but it still had that gritty feel to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the very Snyder-esque palette of darker, and some like burning red. Like So I lean more towards Laramy's take on this one, and I'll say that even the brighter colors I think are more. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we're just trying to psychoanalyze production at this point, but I think that's more of a reaction to BVS than it is a reaction to Marvel. I think. Because even in the writing, that whole thing about, we tried to make Superman kind of the bad guy in BVS, didn't work out. He's got to be the golden child here. So you have that juxtaposition there. So I think that the bright Superman has more to do with previous Superman than it has to do with Joss Whedon stepping in, to be honest.
Because I honestly think that would have happened even if Snyder had stayed. I think even when we get our Snyder cut, you're still going to have a more colorful Superman. If not
the Boy Scout Superman, not the dark Superman.
Yeah, but going back to talking about suits here, going back to the Flash's suit, the Flash would not have had, like you talked about, Flash would not have had that suit in a Marvel movie. That was a DC suit. Mm-hmm. He would have gotten the suit from Bruce, or even the suit he originally had would have been a lot cleaner looking than the suit he ultimately ended up with. So,
I'll go back to Chad's point somewhat. I'm sorry, Blake's point somewhat, in the fact of it may not be it may not look like an MCU movie, but it's definitely there are elements that are definitely Joss Whedon MCU. And I only say that because Laramy knows I went back and started watching all the MCU movies back to back to back. And so when I go back and watch Avengers, the first Avengers and Age of Ultron, even those, if you watch those next to the Russo brothers, Civil War, Infinity War, there is a definite difference of tone, color scheme, action sequences. I mean, it's almost, I almost feel bad how much I enjoyed the first two Avengers movies now, because they are much more cartoonish and much more, I wouldn't even say more humor based, but you can tell it's a different audience, or it's definitely a different vision of the Avengers in that first one versus how they are in Infinity War. And some of that's growth and character arc over the series, but just from the style of the director and production, there's a clear definitive difference. And unfortunately in this movie, it changes from scene to scene instead of from movie to movie.
Yeah. Tim, the great unifier. Blake's point makes a lot more sense through that lens. I would agree with that. That if you just take Joss Whedon's version of the early MCU, you do definitely get more of that feel to this movie than any other DC movie. So, yeah, I would agree with that.
But I think ultimately, to wrap this up so we can move on and bring it full circle, my whole thing at the beginning is this movie does not exist in the Whedon style, and it does not exist in the Snyder style. So really, you can see elements of both, but there's always the argument to pull you to the other side as well. So, all right, but this is Moving Panels. We do like to talk about any connection these movies have to the comics, and as I mentioned before, I think the strongest connection is Justice League #1 from the New 52 in November 2011. I mean, it is the same team up, minus Green Lantern. Again, they had 7, but you take Green Lantern out, is the same team up.
Sorry, Chad.
There is even the whole thing about the parademons. The comic opens the same way this movie opens. Well, with the exception of that found footage Superman thing. Of Batman
scaring somebody to...
Well, actually, in the comic, the person he's chasing is the parademon in the comic.
Right.
But it's the same outcome. He's trying to question the parademon. The parademon explodes, self-detonates, whatever happens to it. So all of that's the same. The mother boxes being a tie-in to everything is what happens in this initial run of the New 52 Justice League. It's all about the mother boxes. I will say, though, the whole... as Chad kind of alluded to earlier, the whole unification, that was so confusing. Mm-hmm. I wasn't sure where they were going with that. It kind of felt like instead of stealing from comic books, they were stealing from Lord of the Rings for a lot of this.
Yeah,
especially the epic battle scene there, was really Lord of the Rings-esque, Return of the King there.
Well, even talking about it being the different, tribes or races,
right. Were given to different people to protect them. Yeah. One to the race of men, to the Amazonians, and what, it was just, you're right. It almost too much. Somebody just watched Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy and thought this works out pretty well. But
that's Warner Brothers, so they own both properties. So they can
I know I'm picking on a lot of very specific stuff, but that parademon scene at the beginning, that works in a comic book. It doesn't work in a movie. You were thrust right into something that made zero sense. The parademon explodes, some cubes fall out of it, and nothing's ever explained. Yeah. And to this day, I still do not understand. Did I miss something, guys? Did you find out what happened with those cubes that told Bruce everything he needed to know about the parademons were coming?
And now I'm even starting to forget that scene. Did cubes fall out of him, or was it just when he exploded, it made 3 square marks on the wall? And
yes,
yeah.
I thought it was. I think it's 3. He explodes, and somehow 3 squares are outlined on the wall, and Bruce all of a sudden has the keys to the universe.
Yeah,
just seeing those 3 squares, not cubes.
It was man, what in the world? Yeah. And again, we're watching a superhero movie. I get the whole. There's a suspension of disbelief a little bit here that
we got to have a narrative.
We're going into it. Yeah, exactly.
You have to have a narrative.
Just holy yeah. But yeah, it was, I don't know. And I love dark, Batman with parademon stuff. That's great. It totally, to me, did not work in that. You just got thrown into it right after the bizarre, wistful Superman. Mm-hmm. There's just so much wrong with it.
Yeah, here's another thing. Did Batman just let that dude go? The thief that he was?
Yeah, I guess so.
He hopped off the roof while he was hogtied, just down the stairs. And
what I love is that the thief even hung around, because he showed back up after the.
He's like, what was that?
The parademon going, hey, what was that? Is that aliens? Is this because of Superman? I'm like, dude, you could have gotten away by this point.
Dumbest criminal.
And correct me if I'm wrong, when Batman was going after, once he saw the parademon, went after the parademon, he went to another rooftop, right? Mm-hmm. So,
don't remember. Yeah.
So then the thief also jumped down to that same rooftop?
Sure, why not?
Yeah, again, it's that narrative and whatnot. But are any of you familiar enough with that New 52 run of Justice League to talk about any more of the connections there?
No, I have not dived into the New 52 stuff. DC lost me a little bit with that, to be honest. But
I was strictly Batman on New 52. That's actually where I got into comics, was New 52. Greg Capullo, Scott Snyder on the Batman run. But I didn't really get into the Justice League stuff because it's at a certain point in time, kind of like this movie, a little too complicated and confusing to keep up with.
And thanks for letting me and Chad feel old by saying you got into comics with the New 52.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. All right. I also want to bring in, this was something that I hinted at earlier when I said there was a spoiler. I also see a connection, and this is also the New 52. There was Earth 2. And there was a run from issues 14 through 26 from September of 2013 to October 2014. And this is a whole story with Steppenwolf, and he's going after the quote-unquote Justice League of Earth 2. And in that, he has a character named Brutal. Is how I believe you would pronounce it. And Brutal is just wiping people out. And it is then revealed in issue 16 that Brutal is actually an evil version of Superman. And so going into what Blake was talking about earlier of, there being like a bizarro Superman, that's exactly what this run is it's a clone of Superman, because Superman had been killed by Steppenwolf earlier in the storyline in the Earth 2 version. Mm-hmm. And they cloned him to make this evil version. So he pretty much is Bizarro. He is controlled by Steppenwolf, but then turns on Steppenwolf and actually kills Steppenwolf, and then reveals...
Yeah, as evil clones are prone to do.
Yes, and then reveals to be evil Superman, and that continues the whole rest of the storyline there. And to be honest, I think this movie did miss out for not having Superman be the villain.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. For sure. That would have been way more compelling, especially after setting up just how much Bruce is digging into. We need Superman, and we need this, him as a symbol and all this kind of stuff.
Well, even back to Batman v Superman, when he says the 1% chance that Superman would be evil.
Oh, man. Yeah, that was a big miss. So I take back all comments I said about Zack Snyder being a big comic fan. He clearly didn't read the ones, so,
Well, because even I remember when they were filming this, because I'm the big Superman guy, and Henry Cavill tweeted out the close-up of the black suit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that.
And of course, everybody was, he's going to wear the black suit. Well, could you imagine the twist if the black suit, instead of being his regeneration suit, was because he was the villain? And they do, because they do kind of start that way. Barry talks about the whole Pet Cemetery thing.
Right.
Yeah. We've already seen that the way they're going to wake him up is the same way that Lex created Doomsday. Mm-hmm. And then we do get the one little fight. Which, of course, then is completely resolved. Just like in Batman v Superman, everything's resolved by saying Martha. This time, Superman is okay as long as he sees Lois.
Right.
Which brings me to something else later. I'll get into that later. But yeah, I just think they missed out by having Superman be the villain. Let that be the second, third act of the movie.
Yeah.
And yes, have him become good again at the end. Have him destroy Steppenwolf the same way that he did in this Earth 2, but instead of then continuing to be the villain, he snaps to, realizes what's happening, and then destroys Steppenwolf.
Yeah, so many missed opportunities in this movie. Though, there's a lot being made out of the black suit being played up big time in the upcoming Snyder Cut. Yeah. So maybe we will get Laramy's movie. I don't know.
Speaking of possibly missed opportunities, small little part here. The detective that Gordon, which by the way, you want to talk about a great performance for such a small role. Yeah. Jim Gordon is great in this.
I need more J.K. Simmons as Commissioner Gordon.
I like J.K. Simmons. But anyway, there's the scene where a detective is talking to him about the parademons and people seeing these, demons and whatnot. It's one of those that you don't realize it, but that detective is Crispus Allen. And any comic book fan knows Crispus Allen will later become the Spectre. Now, I don't know if that's just we're going to throw that in there for the nerds like us, the same way that they did it in Man of Steel with Guardian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that was, or if, again, they are trying to build a universe and maybe he'll come back. We don't know. But I wanted to throw that out there as a little nerd bit there.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think you can see that they're clearly trying to set things up for later. And I know we keep making the comparisons over and over again, but Marvel movies do the same thing. There are plenty of setups that we haven't seen any payoff to yet. Adam Warlock and all the faces that are on the Pillar of Champions that the Hulk is on.
Yeah, but don't you feel a little bit more confident that they will pay them off?
Yeah, there's that. But the effort is there, though. They're trying to drop little things in, just like earlier talking about the Green Lanterns. You're making a little bit of a cameo in the movie. They're definitely trying to give themselves room to grow. The problem is they tried to bust, much larger than they had build up to pay off at this movie. So, yeah.
All right,
but it would be.
So let's continue cool. the whole payoffs and whatnot. And this was something that I was worried Blake was going to start bringing up a little bit earlier, just a minute ago. Let's go back to Batman v Superman. The flashback. Mm-hmm. When Flash comes to Bruce and tells him, that Lois is the key and blah, 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 blah. Was he talking about the moment that happens in this movie?
No. I think they're clearly trying to set up Flashpoint.
So you think that? So you think that moment still hasn't happened of him?
I think we still have not seen payoff of that. No.
Okay.
I think they're trying to set up Flashpoint so much so to the point where when Barry goes to visit his dad in the prison, his dad's like, "I need you to make your own future. Like, make sure that you do for yourself." And I was like, "Could you be a little more blatant about the fact that you want to set up Flashpoint?"
Yeah.
And so I think I don't think this scene with Lois Lane is a callback to that or call forward or wherever we are in the timeline at this point. I don't think that's the case. I think that's yet to happen. And as Chad said, like Flashpoint, fingers crossed, is on its way at some point in time.
Right.
But I haven't seen that timeline yet.
Well, I'm with y'all. I was honestly curious to see if any of y'all went possibly, because then my follow-up was going to be, okay, but when did he do it? Like, when did he go back in time?
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to Blake's point about the Flashpoint, I want to say Flashpoint was supposed to come out fairly soon after this one, and I think because Aquaman kind of got all the, he was more the breakout star than the Flash was. I think they put that one ahead, and then because this one didn't make the money they wanted to, they kind of shelved Flashpoint. So I see where that could be a possibility there. I mean, I never would have thought that. I wouldn't have put those two moments together. But yeah, I think that was more of a Flashpoint setup than what we saw in Justice League.
Also, to Laramy, to your argument that like when did he do it? When in this timeline did he do it? When has he learned to travel through time yet?
Yeah,
right. So we have by the end of Justice League, there's no hint that he understands that he has that ability.
Well, and he also when he did the portal or whatever it was, he had some sort of helmet. Like I will always remember that helmet. And there is still something more there, but just wanted to bring that in. Last thing I want to hit, as we kind of have alluded to throughout this, is what was missing from this movie. And for me, as I again mentioned earlier when I talked about just watching Endgame, and you can look at almost any of the team up from any Marvel movie, and that's it. It's a team up moment. There is no team up moment. I mean, yes, you've got the shot of when the little bat helicarrier thing lowers down and they walk out with all the fog, but that didn't get me pumped to go, oh, it's on now. It wasn't like...
Because then they immediately split up after that.
Yeah.
Like as soon as they get off the plane, they go to separate ways.
Because we didn't get, like in the Avengers, when they all ended up in the circle, the iconic shot where they're circling around them and it's like, okay, it's about to happen. Or Guardians of the Galaxy, when they all hold hands in order to take the power of the Power Stone. We didn't get those moments. I wanted to see... The closest we got was when Cyborg catches Aquaman and says the ride's not over yet and throws him.
Yeah.
I wanted to see more of those using their powers together type thing, you know?
Yeah.
Kind of like we saw in Avengers, where or any of the Avengers movies, where Thor and Captain America used the hammer and the shield in some sort of combo, or the lightning.
Yeah, I mean, literally, as you're describing these scenes and bringing them back up, like, I'm getting tingles.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, those moments, you're like, that was awesome. And there's no moment in this movie where you have that. At the end, you still kind of feel like these individuals will just be like, all right, bro, see ya. And they head on their way.
Good times.
Yeah.
Brunch later.
Yeah. Job done.
Yeah.
And out, like, kind of thing. And so,
but like you want to see in that end scene with Steppenwolf, you know, Wonder Woman holding him back with a lasso of truth, and Flash circling around quickly, and Batman throwing $100 bills at him. Y'all, everybody using their powers for the good of the team is what you wanted to happen at the end. It just didn't. It never came together.
Yeah, but couldn't you?
Would Aquaman throw a fish at him? Is that what's next? Aquaman.
yeah. Cans of tuna, chicken of the sea.
But, I mean, couldn't you imagine? I mean, just something like, remember Barry held on to a Batarang.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, what if Barry pulls the Batarang out at some point and used it in the fight for something to save Batman?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Or something along those lines. Or Wonder Woman wraps the lasso around Aquaman and then uses it to launch Aquaman, you know, pitchfork first towards a few guys, or spins him around while he's just taking out parademons, you know?
Yeah, I think the only moment that comes close to what you're talking about, and I'm not saying it should be that moment, but when they all realize that Batman is going to sacrifice himself when he's pulling all the parademons with the radar noise or whatever, and then they show up to save him, and like, oh, your plan was to die. What kind of? So that to me was the only moment where they kind of worked together as a team to save him. But then after that, they're all doing their own thing again. So, and then the only other time they teamed up was when the Flash kind of pushed Wonder Woman's sword where she could catch it. Mm-hmm. But like you said, those are so minimal and so few and far between. You didn't have that great team up moment.
Yeah, and they don't build that emotion like Chad was talking about, that feeling. I mean, going to what Chad's talking about, all three of you, including me, so all of us, when you hear, hey, Cap, on your left.
Dude.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And you saw, like, there were sparks of that. Mm-hmm. So you needed to have, so there's the moment with Superman where he challenges Flash to the race to save, you know, at the end and everything. And so you needed that, but like with the whole team perspective. You needed Superman to own leadership of the team in that way, or Wonder Woman to do something like that. You needed all the little moments that we've talked about up till now, where you had the hero helping a hero, but then you needed the one where they like come together and there's that coagulating moment where they realize that they're accomplishing so much more as a team than they could have independently, and you never get that payoff.
Mm-hmm. By the way, can we talk
which is
about
ironic since
with Flash and Superman?
It's ironic since the come together.
We're just going to keep talking on top of each other. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, on top of each other. No, it's ironic because the come together cover plays over the end credits, you know, and nobody ever comes together. Just like a Laramy and mine's conversation just now came together and merged into one. But yeah, so it's frustrating.
No, I was just going to play off of what Chad was talking about with the scene, the end or mid-credit scene of them showing who's faster. Can we not talk about how they, again, ignore how fast Wonder Woman has to be? She stopped every bullet from an automatic machine gun.
To say that, I was like, why wasn't she part of the race? I mean, yeah, because when that fight scene happened again, watching it again today, I was like, has she always had that ability? Did I miss that?
I didn't realize she was that fast, Tim. I had no idea. Yeah. I was like, when did that happen?
Powers seem to change from film to film of what she can do. And we won't get into 1984 and what that was.
Thank goodness.
So, but yeah.
We don't have another hour.
Yeah. All right. I do want to talk about one positive. We've bashed this movie a little bit, and now we've hit some positives, but I want to talk about my biggest positive, the music. I actually enjoy the music to a point, especially the fact that Danny Elfman used some of his own music from the Tim Burton movies in a lot of the scenes. The guitar riff that he gives to Wonder Woman for her little leitmotif, and then the use of John Williams' Superman. When Superman comes back from the dead and you get the dun 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 dun, and then it goes off key because you know something's not right, which then Aquaman even says. He was like, he ain't right. But then he even brings it back. We get the rest of it. If you didn't hear it, we get the rest of it when he flies in at the end to take out. You get the dun 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 right there. And so I enjoyed the little nods in there with what Danny Elfman did with the score. Now, as much as I say I like that, we can also go into the whole production side of that, because as much as we talk about the writing and the directing, did you also know that Danny Elfman was brought in last minute to completely change the score? Because he wasn't the original composer. So, again, this movie... Yeah, lots of disconnect because of it's the saying, too many chefs to the pot. I do still think that this movie could have been better if there was more of it, and maybe we'll get that with the Snyder Cut, with it being 4 hours.
We're definitely getting more. Yeah. We don't know if it'll be cohesive. There's definitely more.
This one, I think so.
So, lastly, we got to end with the setup for the sequel, the end credit scene in which we see Lex Luthor and Slade, or Deathstroke, if you want to call him that, and the clear setup to what will be, or what might have been. We don't know if this is now completely squashed, the Legion of Doom. Because here's the thing, as much as Marvel has made the end credit scene famous, DC has kind of avoided it since Green Lantern. Because they did the one in Green Lantern to set up Sinestro, and then it was kind of faded away from that.
Could have done without it.
Yeah, I mean, I was excited about it when I saw it, because that could be really cool, and maybe it could be cooler than what I just watched. But now,
that got me. That was good.
Now it just makes me sad because I'm like, we're never going to see it. We're never going to see it. I like Slade, and I like that villain character. So I'm
right.
See that film.
However,
so
man, this is me and Tim in a nutshell. He's like the silver lining, and I was watching it going, I hate Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor. I hate this character.
100%. Absolutely.
I don't need Lex, but I would like a Deathstroke movie, definitely.
Yeah.
By the way, did any of you think that there's actually already 3 members of that Legion of Doom and not the 2 you see? Trying to figure out what I'm connecting.
Remember thinking that. Yeah, I don't remember thinking that now.
Think of the prisoner that was in Lex's cell. Guard turns him around. He is just laughing hysterically.
Oh, yeah. They were already trying to hint that. But that's even problematic. You had a Joker, in the Suicide Squad movie already. And I don't know. But you're not wrong. That's what they're hinting at.
All right, so I think it's time to wrap this up and for all of us to make our final decisions with our moving panels, bag it, stack it, or trade it. I will, based off of the way I'm seeing you guys on my screen, we'll go in that order. So, Blake, what are you going to do? Bag it, stack it, or trade it?
There have been epic disasters throughout history. The Titanic, the Hindenburg, and then Justice League in 2017. So I am going to trade it for my favorite cut of beef, the Snyder Cut, here in a little while. So that's me. Trade it. I want to get rid of it. I don't care to watch it. I saw it in theaters and just now saw it again when we decided to do the podcast. I'm over it.
So you're trading it for something you don't even know if it'll be good or not.
I love a good mystery grab bag, Laramy.
Yeah. He's trading it for hope. Like the wine.
Yes. It's like a river.
Like a river. That was my thing. What? It's like what does that have to do with hope?
Oh, God.
Finding your hope. Come on, man.
You hope you make it down the river? There's banjo music playing somewhere? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's why he stopped and looked off in the distance. He even didn't get his own analogy. He was like, I'm just going to stop talking now, and looked off.
Oh, God.
Yeah. It looks like an S. Well, yeah, it's supposed to. It's a river. What?
all rivers are S's, but not all S's are rivers, obviously.
Put that on a t-shirt. I'll buy it.
Nice.
Okay. Sorry.
All right, Tim. Bag it, stack it, or trade it.
I'm with Blake. I'm trading this one. I would trade this for Age of Ultron, even though it's by far the worst of the Avengers movies.
Nice.
Also directed by Joss Whedon. With a lot of parallels. Like watching Age of Ultron, I'm like, why do I feel like I'm watching the end of Justice League with Sokovia and these random Russian kids in their house and I didn't understand that part of the movie at all and felt like it was totally unnecessary. I know we didn't talk about it, so I had to throw it in right there. But yeah, I'm trading this for Age of Ultron 6 days out of the week.
Nice. I didn't even think about the whole the Russian people that we got to save. All right, Chad, are you going to continue the trend, or are you going to surprise us? Bag it, stack it, or trade it?
This is not my favorite movie. I'm just turning this in for store credit. I'm just ready to carry that credit forward. I'll take it back to the comic shop. There's something coming out that I want, so I'm out of it. So no, not one of my favorite movies at all, and it really is unfortunate because it had the specter of BVS already and everything that it had to overcome, and it just is such a hodgepodge Frankenstein of a film, all the cliches that we've used so far, that it just made it very mediocre. It's not that it's a terrible movie. It just doesn't even come close to living up to its potential.
Yeah, I gotta admit, after some of that, I probably leaning more towards trade it, but my initial thought was to stack it. And it's only because of
Superman's in it.
Well, that.
There it is.
But it's the glimmer of the kid in me getting to see the Justice League, getting to see those super friends that I grew up watching on Saturday morning. But that ultimately is what this movie is. It's a Saturday afternoon watch. I'm going to turn it on while I'm folding laundry, and that's what it is. I love that Tim brought up the connection to Age of Ultron, because I'm watching this going, okay, we've got same exact plot line as the original Avengers movie. You got a villain with horns who is trying to steal a box that is really just a MacGuffin to move the plot along.
Right.
You've got a whole horde of alien creatures that the team has to fight off. And then you even break it down. We've already talked about Batman is Tony Stark. He's Iron Man. Aquaman is Thor. Wonder Woman is the Captain America. Superman is Hulk. Just like in Avengers, Hulk comes in and smashes the crap out of Loki. That's what Superman comes and does to Steppenwolf. Flash is Hawkeye. And then I guess Cyborg has to be Black Widow, because that's the only way it pairs up. I have no rhyme or reason for that one. It was just they were the only ones left. But that's what made me originally say stack it, is I got to see the Justice League. The kid in me got to see the Justice League. And until I get better Justice League, this is my Justice League movie. And so I put it in stack it because it's the only way I'm going to get to see the Justice League in live action.
But you just said you can see the Justice League in Avengers if you wanted to. I mean, it's like DC did the old meme thing where like, can I borrow your homework from Marvel? And not only did Marvel say, yeah, you can borrow it, but we're going to tell the teacher about it and send the teacher with you to do the homework too.
Or as I found out in college, because it's Joss Whedon. It was Joss Whedon stealing from Joss Whedon. And as I found out in college, you can actually plagiarize yourself.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Make a note of that.
And so I got in trouble one time for plagiarizing myself in college. So, hey, there it is. All right. Anybody got any last thing they want to say to wrap up this probably 2-hour episode after I edit it and all?
No, what a blast, though, guys. This was awesome.
Yeah. I enjoyed this a lot. This was great.
I knew it had to be. I mean, we'll definitely do this probably also whenever we get around to talking about the Avengers. Just a movie, if they're going to team up and talk about that, we got to team up and have a bigger conversation about it. The Snyder Cut will be coming out within a week from the release of this episode. And so we will be together, if not busy, but we will try to all four get back together and give our thoughts about the Snyder Cut in a quick one-shot next week. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on this.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Booyah.
Let's do brunch later.
Yeah.
All right, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
We're having bedtime meltdown, by the way. So
someone has children trapped in their computer.
No, my little girl is not happy that it's time to get ready for bed. So
I do the same thing when I wake up in the morning. That's my reaction.